Hello Goyim, it's Rorschach here. So I've just been to the comic book store this Wednesday, picked up Man and Superman #1 for $9.99. This is 4 comic books all together, the entire arc from beginning to end. A story written in 2006 to 2009 by Marv Wolfman. It does seem a little bit anachronistic in places, because there are some dated pop cultural references. I noticed a reference to that movie with Tom Cruise shouting, "Show me the money, show me the money," and there's also a reference to Fight Club as well. But the main gist of the book is that America appears to be giving away their freedom for the illusion of security. And I'll read out a quote from Superman at the end of the book. I won't do any spoilers here because this is a good book and I think you should check it out. It's certainly worth the $9.99 for the entire arc here for the 4 issues in one book. Right, so this is from Superman. I can do many things, but I can't protect you from yourselves. So you have to believe in the good. And this is the important part. You have to make sure you don't surrender your freedoms for security. So what did America do after September the 11th, 2001? Did they give away their freedoms for the illusion of security? Oh yes, and the Patriot Act still survives to this very day. Why do I mention 9/11? What's this got to do with 9/11? Well, it was written 2006, 2009, but it was cancelled. It was not published. Why was it cancelled? Well, Marv Wolfman does not mention why it was cancelled, but I will speculate that it was cancelled for this reason. That the plot is about a terrorist conspiracy where aeroplanes are being flown into skyscrapers in Metropolis City and people are dying there in the explosion. So in 2009, 9/11 was still fresh in the memory, wasn't it? I guess in 2019, 9/11 just becomes a part of history, doesn't it? It's something that you see on the TV. It's not something that maybe a lot of people can still remember as being the thing that they witnessed before their very eyes, as I did. I watched the events of 9/11 as they unravelled on television, and it was shocking. It was like, this might seem like a strange thing to say, but it did seem like a movie. It seemed like a movie to see those things happening, because, well, it's the sort of thing that you don't see in reality, and there it was happening on the news. Then you start to realise that, well, people are dying here, and it becomes too horrific to contemplate. And you want answers. You want to know who's responsible for this. And in this book, which is it's an origin story, really, of Clark Kent going to Metropolis and finding his way as a superhero. He doesn't actually dress up as Superman throughout the entirety of this book. He flies around just wearing his normal, office gear and a bag on his head sometimes as well. But what he's doing here is he's making his name. There we go. That's what he looks like. He's just flying around trying to, hide or conceal his identity. Yeah, what he's doing is he's making his name, getting his career going in the mainstream news media. And the way he gets his mainstream news media career going is that he uncovers the truth with the help of Lois Lane, who is portrayed as, well, angelic, really, as a perfect human being in this book. He finds who's responsible for the terrorist atrocities. He works it out. He puts 1 and 1 together, 1 being corporations, 1 being the government, and he makes 2. He looks at who gains from this, because the terrorists are, by their cartoon Dr. Evil, Austin Powers type terrorists. There's no ideological underpinning. There's no religious motivations for the terrorist atrocities. They want $5 million or whatever, something like that. They want a cash sum, and it's pretty obvious that there's something afoot here, that there's something going on which needs to be investigated. much as was the case after 9/11, you have to look at who stands to gain from all of this. And one thing that the mainstream media did not do in the real world, which Clark Kent and Lois Lane do in this comic book, is do a proper investigatory job and find out who was actually behind the plot. I lived through the events of 2001, and the mainstream media was not really interested in finding out who's responsible for it all. Instead, they were very quick, without any evidence, to start banging the drums for war against Iraq, a country that we all know. I knew at the time, people knew at the time, there was a big march against the war on Iraq in London. 1 million people marched in London against this war. It was known at the time that Iraq had nothing at all to do with 9/11. People were not that naive. People understood what was going on. But the government pressed ahead with the official story, helped by the corporate mainstream media, who did not question, did not do their job, did not investigate. Instead, they went along with the government and acted as perfect lapdogs, which enabled the lies about weapons of mass destruction to be pushed on the public, even though the public didn't believe it, with mainstream, at least mainstream news media approval. So I find it quite telling, really, that in the pages of a comic book, journalists are portrayed as independent, brave truth seekers who just want to get to the truth of the matter and inform the public of what is going on. They want to find out the truth. But in the real world, the mainstream media isn't really about that. And today, in 2019, we've got a new term for the corporate mainstream media, and that is fake news. That is not just a term used by Donald Trump. Yeah, I know it was birthed by the mainstream media in an attempt to demonize the alternative media, but the reason why it was so easy to turn it around and use it against the corporate mainstream media is because of the events after 9/11 and the wars in the Middle East, all pushed by the corporate mainstream media, not doing what they are supposed to do. So again, it's very, very telling that in the pages of a corporate comic book, a DC comic book, the mainstream media is still portrayed in a flattering light, which they do not deserve when you see what they actually do in the real world. If we had journalists like Clark Kent and Lois Lane, they would not be working for the Daily Planet here, a big newspaper. They'd be on the internet. They'd be censored of the internet. They'd be called conspiracy theorists. They'd be called alt-right. They'd be called Nazis. They'd be demonized. They would not be working in the corporate sphere. But having said all of that, because this comic book asks a question that does not get asked today, the question being, what do you want? Do you want security or do you want freedom? And Superman is obviously on the side of freedom rather than the illusion of security, which is promised to you by the corporations and the government working together. That question doesn't get asked anymore, and it's quite sad, but very, very telling indeed, in that the world that we live in today is a world where freedoms are diminishing by the day as the corporations working with government clamp down on social media, and the corporate sphere has become an area where the light of truth is rarely seen. If I can say a quick word about the book in terms of a character portrayal of Clark Kent, forgetting all that 9/11 and liberty and security and mainstream media journalist stuff, It's a very good book just because it shows a insecure man who doesn't really know how to be a hero, doesn't really know how to live in the city where people don't know each other, and is finding his way, is finding his self-confidence really. In that regards, as a character portrayal of Clark Kent, it's excellent. It's excellent storytelling and very, very enjoyable. But as I wrap up this review, and hopefully I haven't spoiled the book too much for you, definitely check it out. It's definitely worth picking up this comic book. The lingering thought that I have in my mind, apart from the way that the mainstream media is portrayed in a flattering light, which is not at all in keeping with my experience of the mainstream media in the real world, it's that question about liberty against security, which doesn't get asked anymore. And that says a lot, don't you think? That people have given away their freedom because they just want to be safe. You know what the safest place in the whole wide world is? The safest place for any of us is a prison. That's where we're living now. That's why Alex Jones calls his show Prison Planet, because that's what he's warning against. Marv Wolfman was warning against it as well in 2009. DC didn't want to publish it. They published it in 2019, and the battle's already been lost. You're living in a prison planet, and you're giving away your freedom for the illusion of security. But what do you guys think? Please let me know in the comments down below. Check out this book. I think you enjoy it. Looking forward to the comments on this one. Cheers guys, take care. Catch you all later.